Streaming live, this is News 12 Now.
Hey, good morning to you. I'm Meteorologist Matt Jones. We're doing this special weather discussion here talking about tornadoes in the ArkLaTex and how it has really quieted down. It was kind of interesting because we started off very active this severe weather season. You know, back in April and May, it was, at least the first half of May, was very stormy. In fact, our severe weather season really got rolling very early this year. We started seeing those, tornadic events, and we had severe weather really beginning all the way back in January. We had a couple of bigger events then, and we had a lot of severe weather in the month of February. And even March was pretty active. April we had the severe storms too, and then we had that heavy rainfall event. If you remember that was in the early part of May. We had all that heavy rain and we had those tornado warnings during the morning broadcast. It was pretty busy. I think that was like the first week of May, but it's been kind of unusual because it's like the severe weather season has just completely turned off, and it has ended a little bit early this year in the ArkLaTex. But I want to talk about some climatology as far as severe weather is concerned. Let's take a look at some weather graphics here. You can kind of see what I'm talking about. So this is what we're talking about, the average tornadoes in the ArkLaTex. And on an average year, you would typically see this begin to ramp up in the spring, which is what has taken place. I want to go to let's go to a full screen graphic so you can kind of see this a little bit better. But notice as you get into January, February, and March, we typically do get at least a few tornadoes on average. And then we really start to peak as far as our severe weather season. That peaks in April. That's when we have the highest number of tornadoes on average here in the ArkLaTex, averaging around 10 each year. It's a yearly average, so it's not going to always be like that, but that is the general case, is that April is typically our most active month of the year. And then as we get into May, it's honestly very active as well. It's a very active time in May, and then that quickly drops off as we head into June. So you can see by June we really lowered that amount of severe weather, and then July and August typically are some very quiet months in the ArkLaTex. But it seems as though this year we've kind of started that quiet season a little bit early. And so we really had, again, that active stretch that was back in March and April. And then now that we're getting into the end of May, we've really quieted down. And as you know, it has been very dry lately. So we kind of turned off the faucet the first week of May, and then we've hardly had a drop of rain here over the last 2 to 3 weeks. It has been extremely quiet here in the ArkLaTex. But as we look at some other data here, we can talk about the tornado probabilities, and you can see how as we head through March and into early April, this is on average what we see across the U.S. And the tornado hotspot as we get into early April is pretty much right here in the ArkLaTex. So you can see that deeper shade of orange there from Oklahoma City back through Shreveport, all the way back into Mississippi, Alabama, and even into North Georgia. That's typically the area that we really watch for as we head into the end of March, early portion of April. And then as we get into, about May 1st or so, that's when we really see the peak across our area. And you can really see that hot spot there is across the traditional Tornado Alley area. So that would be across, Oklahoma, Kansas, and North Texas. That's typically where we have the highest probability of tornadoes by the 1st of May. But this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. So as we get deeper into the month of May, that severe weather threat on average shifts a little bit farther to the north. So watch what happens here. We take you to June 1st, which of course is tomorrow, and you can see how that threat area has shifted farther to the north and west, back across portions of Kansas, Oklahoma, and into portions of Texas, but it shifts north and west. And the reason for that is because as you head deeper into the spring and into the summer months, the jet stream lifts north. And the jet stream, if you remember what the jet stream is, it's a ribbon of very strong winds high up in the atmosphere. So, you go up about 20, 30,000 feet up in the atmosphere. Those winds can be blowing over 100 miles an hour. That's what we refer to as the jet stream. So basically the jet stream is, I like to call it, it's an atmospheric highway up in the atmosphere. That's where those storm systems like to travel along. And so as you get into the late summer or late spring into the early summer months, that jet stream lifts farther northward. It's a seasonal shift, and it happens pretty much every single year. So as that jet stream lifts farther north, that takes the severe weather potential away from the ArkLaTex and shifts that farther to the north as well. And you can see that. So by June 1st, again, we're sort of getting out of that season here. Now, we can still get severe weather events. We can still see tornadoes in the ArkLaTex in the month of June, but the highest threat definitely shifts a little bit farther off to our north and west. And then look what happens as you head deeper into summer. Kind of vanishes. A lot of the country really quiets down, and that's because as we get into especially late July and early August, those strong jet stream winds aloft actually shift all the way north into Canada. So, I used to be a storm chaser back in the day before I did TV weather, and a lot of storm chasers actually head north north, across over the border into Canada to get the storm chasing as we get into August, because that's where the highest tornado threat is later in the summer, is up into Canada. That's where the jet stream is. That's where these stronger upper level winds are. And you can see by August 1st, most of the southern half of the U.S. not really dealing with too much severe weather. Those winds aloft are typically pretty light, and so you don't really often get a lot of severe weather in that type of setup. But it is kind of interesting how that is on a seasonal basis, and we see that pretty much every year take place, how that threat area shifts a little bit farther to the north. And so really it does have to do with those upper level winds, though. That's really the main factor here when it comes to tornado production. Of course, you need other ingredients too in the atmosphere. You need instability, you need a lot of moisture, you need a lot of turning of the winds. There's a lot of ingredients that come together for tornadoes. But again, one of the bigger ingredients is those strong upper level winds. And as you can see, we're definitely on the downward trend here as far as that severe weather threat. Let's go back to that other graphic that I started off with, talking about our seasonal threat, and how you can kind of see how, let me just load the graphic here for you, but you can see how we peak typically in the month of April, and so that's basically already past us now, and then we get into May and that threat begins to taper off. And I was talking to Chief Meteorologist Jeff Castle a couple days ago about how it was kind of unusual this year, how the severe season just abruptly ended, because typically you would see it sort of extending through the month of May and then slowly tapering off as we head into the start of June. But it's almost seems as though it just kind of we turned a switch and it just completely ended, because it has been very quiet. And I think we're going on about 2 weeks in a row, almost 2.5 weeks now, without any sort of rainfall in the Shreveport area. So a little unusual how we've just kind of ended our severe weather season. But I do want to mention, as we get deeper into the summer months, of course, hurricane season that begins tomorrow. And so our focus is going to shift more from these big cold fronts and these big upper level systems that produce tornadoes to more of a tropical type tornado threat. And you often see that, when a hurricane or a tropical storm makes landfall along the Gulf Coast, if it moves north into Louisiana, you can often get those tornadoes on the outer bands, the spiral bands of those hurricanes. And so that's kind of where we shift our focus as we head towards the mid to late summer and into the early fall. Is if we do see any tropical activity, that could actually increase our tornado potential. But all in all, when we're talking about any big tornado outbreaks or anything like that, that threat has definitely shifted, and it kind of seems like it's ended for the season. So I don't want to, I don't want to jump to the gun too quickly here with that. We're done with severe weather season, because we're not. I still think we'll see maybe a little bit of it, but just based on the pattern that we've been in lately, I think that overall that threat is yes, starting to wind down. So I want to quickly just recap what we're talking about, how the severe threat has been shifting farther north over the last couple of weeks. And you can see April 1st, April 2nd, which was about a month ago, we were right in the heart of that in the ArkLaTex. And then as we get into the 1st of May, that starts to shift a little bit farther to the north and west. And then getting into June 1st, which is where we are right now, tomorrow of course, you can see that threat does shift a little bit farther to the north, and that all has to do with those jet stream winds high up in the atmosphere shifting farther northward. It's a seasonal shift. We see it every year. And then as we get into deeper into the summer months, especially into July and August, you can see that threat really does begin to diminish across the area. But of course, you don't want to let your guard down with that, because we can still see severe weather across our area this time of year. And all it takes is that one tornado, of course, to cause some damage. So the weather team will continue to be with you all summer long. And of course, as I mentioned, we are getting into tropical season now, which is June 1st. And so with that in mind, as we get into tropical season, of course, we're going to keep a close eye on whatever that might bring to us, but that will at least bring the potential as we head deeper into summer of still some tornadic activity. So we're not completely out of the woods just yet.